Thank you for this opportunity to present practices from Serbia. And I will share my screen in a minute. I'm happy to be here with you today. I understand this is a very interesting conference, and also want to thank all of you who chose this session. And my presentation will be based on a career guidance system review that's been coordinated by the ETF and for different countries, including Serbia from Western Balkan region. And I was happy to participate and provide certain overview about good practices and areas for further development. And before I dig a bit deeper into practices, just wanted to briefly mention the regulatory framework that's been developing over years with different strategies and laws in areas of education. And what's interesting for our system is that it's now listening to Peter's presentation, it seems like it's also at certain transition point, transiting from this traditional concepts like matchmaking and following certain steps toward career management skills. And this can be also seen from this brief overview of different regulatory acts. For instance, we mention professional orientation when in our laws on primary education, but for higher levels like secondary education, then already law on secondary education refers to career guidance and counseling as activity to empower mature, responsible career decision with the support of school-based career guidance and counseling teams. So these teams are anticipated to be a support to students and their parents in reaching different career decisions. The idea is to combine and to have, just to turn off the phone that starts ringing at this particular moment. And the teams are composed of different actors from the schools, so services are provided internally from own resources. Combined, we have teachers, but mostly led by school-based psychologists, education specialists, coordinators of traineeship programs and cooperation with enterprises. For secondary school, of course, elementary schools are mostly focused on final grade students. Teams are providing support using mostly 5-step model of professional orientation introduced by GIZ through their large-scale project. Following steps starting with self-discovery, discovering occupations, discovering educational paths, organizing real encounters with the world of work, offering perspective on vocational training paths through these programs, and decision-making. Mostly the approach is to organize workshops, presentations, field visits in order for students at their final grades to be better equipped to reach career decisions about choosing their secondary level educational path. So as I mentioned, teachers and professional associates are mostly involved. In some cases, they cooperate with civil society organizations, which were very active in supporting donors in training and capacity building of school-based teams. And National Employment Service also supports teams, especially in providing psychological instruments and assessment instruments for students that desire to take them. Of course, there are also other actors like Euro guidance centers that offer direct support either to teams or to students and their parents struggling in reaching career decisions at the transition points mostly. But with secondary level, it's a bit different. Target audience are students since day one. In some schools, it's very well understood that career guidance and counseling can play a role in dropout prevention. So students are included in onboarding and in introduction orientation programs, also through career development workshops. Every secondary education school is by law obliged to prepare career guidance and counseling programs and plans. And approach that can be seen in most of the schools is career information sessions, counseling, tasting the world of work through job shadowing, internships, and different kind of activities in the area. Of course, here as well, teams for career guidance and counseling are leading the activities, and they have full autonomy in designing and preparing activities for their students in line with local context, with students' needs, with barriers most often faced in that specific local environment, which is what I think gives the flexibility to the system. And DOTS model that Peter just mentioned was very much used at the beginnings when these career development programs were created or adapted. Our rule books and regulatory framework also recommends career portfolio as an instrument to be used. But most recent development is introducing career management skills as a conceptual core and a guiding paradigm for development of career guidance and counseling programs and plans. So with introduction of the standards for career guidance and counseling, which I'm going to mention in a minute and elaborate a bit more on that in a minute. But with the introduction of these standards, secondary education schools and their teams for career guidance and counseling are advised to focus to focus their programs so that outcomes of their activities in career guidance and counseling area are lead to acquiring certain career management skills as provided within the framework adapted at the national level. What is also interesting for the system is to mention that for dual strand of education, for dual model of education, there are special, let's say, recommendations stipulated in the bylaws that also expand the composition of teams from only teachers, professional associates, and peers. There are also peer career development support schemes in many schools. In dual models of education, company representatives of professional associations related to a certain educational profile and sector are also encouraged to join career guidance and counseling teams. And they also have a very special role in this model of education where they somehow facilitate matchmaking between students and companies that welcome students and host them for work-based learning. So it's relatively new for the system, and it's still in piloting, but there are very many very much successful examples of these practices around the country. So this well-developed regulatory framework provides a solid base for various services, and they're mostly provided as an extracurricular and non-mandatory activities so that students enter voluntarily and come with enthusiasm to work on their career management skills. There are also some optional subjects, but most of the programs are implemented as extracurricular activities, and there's been really interesting evidence of very creative activities because of this flexibility that I've just mentioned. We saw online escape games developed by teachers to encourage students' career decision making, or outdoor scavenger hunts where different clues lead to certain recognitions about career. So yeah, creativity is very much incentivized, and model that I mentioned, standards for career guidance and counseling services. It's an interesting framework because first it was developed through intersectoral cooperation and led by Ministry of Education. So different stakeholders from youth, education, employment, civil society, were there to discuss, elaborate, and at the end align on putting career management skills at the center of this new conceptual framework. It's a recommended framework. It's not obligatory, not imposed, but it's a good base for quality assurance of career guidance and counseling in education, employment, and youth sector, where youth organizations and offices for youth operate and support mostly vulnerable groups such as NEETs. So our standards have 4 elements of education. Besides their standards for career management skills, there are also organizational standards providing recommendations to all those institutions, career centers, how to set up procedures, how to organize their everyday work, standards of career guidance programs, guiding schools' teams, how to structure their activities and to have their goals oriented toward acquiring career management skills. Standards for practitioner competencies offer a base for further professionalization, and ethical standards for different, we call them practitioners because we don't really have the standardized occupation for career counselors, but we have teachers, school psychologists, career counselors in National Employment Service, youth workers, and all programs for their education are in line and with standards promoted by career guidance and counseling services standards. So this is just for you to have a brief overview how career management skills standards are structured. We have 3 key areas of professional and personal development, and we have competences defined for each of these areas, and there are also expected outcomes defined for each of these competences. I will not read all of them, just to give you a flavor under this area of self-discovery and self-understanding, self-examination, ability to create a picture of oneself in relation to career opportunities, and exploring yourself in the context of personal and professional development as a competence is related with one outcome that is phrased as identify their own previous educational work and life experience to understand motives for and barriers to personal professional development. Analyze own characteristic behaviors in different environments to understand values, interests, learning styles. So I'm looking at these outcomes now, and I can see that we are far away from what Peter explained as competences for social and emotional learning. But I think that it's a very solid base for further transition in that direction, in line with all these challenges and that we discussed earlier, and these potential disruptions and existing ones. So I will stop now, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions if they might come later. Thanks.